Welcome back to another edition of One-on-One, New York's longest-running sports call-in show. We're with you on Nightly. I'm Jack Roach, joined with my friend Michael Calamari and our Yankees beat reporter Ryan Gregware, because we've got some New York sports news. The Yankees have just acquired Rangers all-star outfielder Joey Gallo. I don't know if you two agree on the move, but Ryan, I want to hear your immediate thoughts to the trade.
Yeah, so 30 minutes ago, I was just pacing up and down my apartment, watching the Yankees having a great time. Get a call 5 minutes later. Do I want to be on the show? Absolute yes. Slam dunk answer. And I love this trade if I'm the Yankees. And it does everything that they need. He's obviously a left-handed hitter, which they had no offensive production from that side this year. So from that perspective, it's huge. He's also under contract for 2022. And I think that's a big criticism because this year, as I'm sure you guys will get into later, it's been bad for the Yankees. And while they still only are one out in the loss column of the second wild card, you can't confidently say it's a playoff team. And so even if worst case scenario, it doesn't work out this year, you get him under contract next year when you still have your core. So yeah, those are just my quick early thoughts. We'll get more into it now, but I love this trade from the Yankees. Joey Gallo, perfect fit for that short porch in Yankee Stadium.
Yeah, I know Ryan feels that way. I think I'm the opposite side of it. I'm not sure the Yankees need that all or nothing type bat. I mean, that's essentially what a lot of the lineup's already built on. And the 211 batting average career really is disturbing. I mean, it's not what you're looking for if you're a Yankee fan. You want someone that's going to hit in big spots. And for someone like him who's really got a 50% strikeout rate, that's concerning with runners on base, which is what the Yankees have struggled with for a lot of the season. I do understand the other side of it. He's a Gold Glove outfielder. I mean, he gives you the left-handed power bat that the Yankees were in need of. So there's really two ways to look at it. I'm not a huge fan of it because of the lack of average and because of the strikeouts, but he does give you two things the Yankees really needed.
Yeah, I want to stick with the strikeouts for just a second, because you harp on the batting average, issues that he has, and everyone knows what he's able to do in terms of putting the ball out of the park. But people forget that his OBP is 380. Ryan, does it concern you with the strikeouts and just his ability to get on base?
No, absolutely zero part of it. Like you talked about the 380 on base percentage. If you look at just around baseball, the Rays lead baseball in strikeouts. They are 19 games over 500. The Giants and Dodgers are both significantly ahead of the Yankees in strikeouts. They're cruising to playoff spots. It doesn't matter. The Brewers are 28th in average. They've run away with the NL Central. It doesn't matter in 2021 baseball. The game has changed. And you also talk about Joey Gallo with runners in scoring position. He's a 900 OPS. That would be first on the Yankees. So his ability to drive in runs and get on base in those big spots is better than anyone on the team. And the one other thing that has hurt the Yankees has been the ground balls this year. They lead baseball in double plays. Joey Gallo has 9 career grounders and double plays. He doesn't hit the ball on the ground. That's what has killed this team, and that is why he's a perfect fit for this club.
Yeah, I'm really not sure. I understand the ground into double plays and driving in runs, but I look at his time in Texas. He never had a year above 85 RBIs. He doesn't drive in runs like other guys can. He does hit the long ball, but he's not a for sure guy to get in guys with people in running and scoring position. I mean, he strikes out practically 50% of the time. I mean, his last 15 games, he has 42 at-bats and he has 20 strikeouts. I mean, you're going to expect someone to go up there and strike out one out of every 2 at-bats. So if you're willing to be okay with that as a Yankee fan, then yeah, you love this move. But watching Yankee games, it's tough to see someone go and strike out in big spots, especially in the playoffs. And that's when it matters most. That when strikeouts you see and are most important when they strike out runners in scoring position in the playoffs. So for me, that's what's concerning. Is he going to get in guys with runners in scoring position? I'm not really sure because of his high strikeout rate and his low batting average.
Yeah, you can talk about, his lack of maybe production with runners in scoring position with the Rangers, but that's not a good baseball club. I think it's tough to knock him for the RBIs because they just don't have that many great players. And talk about the playoffs all you want, but the path that the Yankees are on without him, they're not trending in the right direction. I don't know if they're a playoff team without him. I'm still not convinced they're a playoff team with him. So you really need a guy that can get you there. And Joey Gallo is going to help. But Ryan and Mike, I want to hear your thoughts. Do you think that the Yankees are going to make another move, or is this Joey Gallo move enough?
Yeah, so if we look at yesterday, the Sessa move was obviously a precursor. You trade him really to free up that salary and 2 roster spots. And the Joey Gallo move, the one thing that we haven't mentioned is they're getting another guy in this deal. They're getting John King, a reliever from the Rangers. He's a 3.5 ERA and about 40 innings of work. So that's a really solid guy. That's giving you what Sessa was giving you, basically. So that's big. If you're the Yankees, you do expect them. You'd want them to make another move, right? And I'm not going to kill them if they don't because they get a reliever and, the best bat in the market, in my opinion. So I certainly would hope that they go out and get another pitcher. But, you still have a few $1 million under the luxury tax. It's very evident that they will not go over it. I've pretty much known that the whole way. They would not have been able to get Gallo likely if they did not trade Sessa and Justin Wilson's contract yesterday. So a few days out, obviously a lot can happen. They also didn't trade any of their top 5 prospects in this one. I think it was more of they traded 6 prospects in the trade. Clark Schmidt was, the headliner, but they kept those top guys, those Jason Dominguez types in the farm system. So we'll see what happens with the Yankees, but you do appreciate them going for it like they have in years past. I think that's been a huge Cashman criticism, especially in 2019 at the deadline, to not get someone. And while it is frustrating because this objectively is, the worst Yankee team in the last few years, it is nice to see them finally having the urgency to going out and getting a guy that really fits the club.
Yeah, I think those are some interesting points. I really don't see the Yankees making another move here. I mean, you're unloading, like Ryan said, 6 prospects to just get Gallo and the reliever, and that's a huge load. And I don't see them being willing to do a similar thing or move for a pitcher. I mean, Max Scherzer was already ruled out since he said he didn't want to come East Coast. He'd rather go to the West Coast, probably a team in the NL West, we speculate. So after that comes out, it doesn't really look like the Yankees are really going to make a splash for another pitcher, which would be the obvious next move. I was a big believer that the Yankees should go out and get a guy like Trey Turner, if they were to make another move. But that I don't think is going to happen anymore. I would rather Trey Turner over Joey Gallo. That's another argument, but this Joey Gallo train, regardless if you like him as a fit for the Yankees, I don't like the move to give up 6 prospects. And I don't think this is a playoff team, even with Joey Gallo on your team.
If they add a guy like, we're hearing some names on the market in terms of starting pitching, like Colorado's John Gray or maybe Minnesota's Jose Barrios. If they add kind of a back end starter like that, can they compete with the A's? Because right now I think they're vying for that same second wild card spot, who just traded for Starling Marte. Do the Yankees have an edge right now, or are they really looking to add?
Yeah, it's hard to look at. I mean, they're not out of it by any stretch. And, I've been put through the chamber this year where you think the season's over after a crushing loss. And then you look at the standings. And I think that's what has kept the Yankees' ability to go for it here because they're 3 out right now, 1 in the loss column. They're in progress right now versus the Rays. A nice win yesterday. They were building momentum before that Boston series. And the number one reason they lost that was the bullpen absolutely collapsed in 2 of those games. So a starter would be nice, and those 2 guys you mentioned are great fits. I just don't see them dealing the prospects. And even if the reason I like this Gallo trade is we've brought up, even if they don't make the playoffs this year, they continue to disappoint. He is under contract next year, and I know You might look at it and say, well, if they could make the playoffs this year, why next year? But the reality of it, this is still a really talented club. You've had, 7 just absolutely crushing, demoralizing losses that no other team has more than one of. And you've had all these guys underperform. So you have to imagine at some point the luck will balance out, even if it's not in the season, it's out of the season. So to have him under contract next year, as opposed to a Trevor Story, Mike brought up Trey Turner. I don't think he'll get dealt. And that package would have taken a lot more to get him. So Gallo, I think, was just, considering the circumstances, considering the extra year of control, considering he's a lefty bat, they've wanted him for years. He really has. Also, if you look at the last, you mentioned the 211 hitter. While average clearly doesn't mean as much in today's game, he has turned himself around the last few years. 2019, he had a true breakout. You can attribute 2020 to a weird season. And I think with the spin rate stuff, he's really been able to get to those high fastballs in ways he wasn't in the past. So I really, you look at him, he's 27. He still has room to grow. And you get him under contract for a year and a half. He grew up a Yankee fan. It really is, in my opinion, a perfect fit. And regardless of what happens the rest of the way, it is encouraging to see Brian Cashman be aggressive. That, I think, is the number one takeaway here. And we just mentioned it because he hasn't been in the past. But, really good job from him to be willing to make this team better midseason.
Yeah, I think, though, you're really going to see if this is a good trade or not, as you said, after the 2022 season, whether you re-sign Gallo on a huge max deal or you let him walk, you're going to either have a World Series ring or at least a pennant, or you're going to have lost 6 prospects and you're going to have to basically hit the drawing board again and try to figure out a way to piece this team together. So I think that the Yankees are really on the clock. If this doesn't work out this year and you don't make a run in 2022, then you have some real problems and you're going to look at this as a bad trade. I think that's the kind of trade it is. If you don't get a pennant or at least a World Series championship, then you've got some serious problems with this trade because you're going to have to re-sign Gallo for probably what's going to be a really, really big deal. And when you already have Stanton under contract and the Judge and Gary Sanchez contracts looming, there's a lot of problems now after that 2022 year. And you're probably going to have to let either Judge or Sanchez go, one of your core guys, and maybe even Gallo. So that's the only thing we're going to have to look at this trade. It's hard to say if it's a good trade or now. If the Yankees really make moves and get a pennant and a World Series bid, then that's going to be a good trade when you look back on it. But if it doesn't, then it probably won't be.
Yeah, and I think that before you can start discounting star players, I think you need to look at the manager of the team. And, this is the move, whether you like it or not, that people wanted Cashman to make. They wanted him to be aggressive, and he went out and got an all-star. So I think that if the Yankees go out, they made their trade, and they don't make a postseason run, or they don't win the World Series, I really think the time is up on Boone. And I don't think there are a lot of Yankees fans that would disagree with me on that one.
I mean, I think you can even say if Boone doesn't make the playoffs this year, there's going to be serious questions if he comes back. I mean, his contract's up after this year. You're not really sure if you bring him back. The press conference with Hal Steinbrenner says otherwise potentially, but I think there's still serious questions if the Yankees don't make the playoffs after getting a guy like Joey Gallo and trading that many prospects to get him. Then it could be Boone's time after this year because you might want to go in another direction while Gallo's still under contract.
Yeah, the one counter argument I'd say to that is just the reason I could see them keeping Boone, and this is a kind of thought that has just popped in my head, is Boone is very likely just a puppet. And so if he is doing exactly what Cashman's saying, if he's getting hands of the lineups and everything like that, it's hard to see them blame him for the lack of success when they were putting him in these situations. If he's not managing the team like he truly wants to, it would be hard to see him go. But the reality of it, that's down the line. All these hypotheticals, will they sign Judge, Stanton, Gallo, letting one of them walk? That doesn't matter right now. Right now, you have these guys under contract for the next 2 seasons. You do have all of them. And so you got to make it work because they have the talent. They've fallen short. And if Gallo is the move to get him over the top, it does not matter if they can't re-sign him in 2 years. It does not matter if they have to let a Gary go because you play for right now. And as we've seen with this Baby Bombers era, we thought it would be a dynasty. That's not how baseball works nowadays. When you have your moment, you got to strike. The Dodgers did with Mookie Betts. They get rewarded. We see it all the time. And so that's what the Yankees are doing here. I think they've learned their lesson from holding on to the prospects. And you just have to hope it's not too late for them.
Yeah, where I disagree with that is I don't think it's the Yankees' moment, really. I mean, you talk about the Dodgers and Betts. I mean, they were one of the top teams in that division for years and had World Series bids. That's not really been the Yankees. And this is a team that's third in the AL East. They're 2.5 games back from the wild card. although that's close, it's not what I would describe as a moment to strike and get your guy. And that's really where I disagree. I don't think the Yankees are in a place to be buying and unloading this much to get this guy because there's still an uphill climb to get into the playoffs. It's not like you have a playoff spot at the moment. So that's what really concerns me because I think there's a real possibility the Yankees are on the outside looking in at the end of this year.
Final thoughts from both of you. We're just about 100 games into the season. Is this Yankees team a playoff baseball team?
You forced me to say something right now. I don't like being forced into these positions, but I'll say they're going to make the playoffs as a wild card team. I've wavered a little bit here, but this move gives me a lot of confidence that they believe they're a playoff team. I also think for the guys in the locker room, it shows that the front office believes in them enough to want to add to the team. I think that does matter. You saw a spark in 2017 that a guy like Todd Frazier brought. He didn't really hit for them, but he added something in the locker room. Gallo, known to be a great teammate, everything like that. You want to force me into a position, Jack? Fine. Yankees will be a wild card team in 2021.
Yeah, I'm going to go against Ryan. I'm going to say they're not a wild card team. I think there's too many good teams on this AL side. I don't think the Yankees are one of them. Their pitching's been hot, but that bullpen really looks weak, and they've been blowing games all year. I don't think it's all going to come together because it hasn't through 100 games, and I don't believe it's going to come together for the last 62. So for those reasons, they're not a playoff team for me.
Yeah, to me, I just see that team, and they're so talented, and it's frustrating to see them struggle, even as a Boston Red Sox fan. But to me, I just see whichever edition in Oakland or in New York, whichever one works out better, I see them grabbing that second wild card. But we will take a quick break. Thank you to Ryan Gregoire for hopping on last minute for this Joey Gallo trade. When we come back, we'll talk Mets and their deadline acquisitions or potential acquisitions with our Mets beat reporter, Sam Davis. Welcome back to One-on-One Nightly. We're joined by our Mets beat reporter, Sam Davis, and I'm just going to start and ask thoughts on the Joey Gallo trade.
Yeah, we were just talking about it. I wanted to just offer up my opinion. Although I am a Mets beat reporter, I can give a little opinion here and there on the New York Yankees. So I think this trade could work out really well, or it could also work out really poorly. That's kind of the way I see it. The Yankees certainly needed a left-handed bat in the outfield, and Gallo plays good defense as well. And he could very well provide that spark. But my issue is a very inconsistent hitter like Joey Gallo's been all year, lots of strikeouts in addition to the lots of homers, has been kind of just like the theme of this lineup in general for the New York Yankees. And I'm worried that he kind of just fits along with the trend of a lot of other hitters that the Yankees have gone out and get and obviously have not worked out this year in terms of just either home run or kind of bust. And I think that's kind of what Joey Gallo provides. But hey, I mean, I think, like I said, this could work out really well for the New York Yankees, and they certainly gave up a lot for it, though. So that's another kind of concern with the trade. But I don't know. You're just going to really have to see how these things play out.
Love it or hate it, the Yankees finally made a move. And I think everyone wants to know, are the Mets going to do the same thing? We're hearing some rumors on some high-profile free agent or pending free agents, maybe one-year rentals. But Sam and Mike, I want to hear your thoughts too. Are there any names that you like that are kind of attached to the Mets in these free agent or trade deadline rumors?
Yeah, I think I don't know. It's been interesting. Obviously, I wish I could know what the Mets are going to do over the next day or so. But GM Zach Scott and kind of everybody's not exactly quite sure. They're feeling out the market for sure. Chris Bryant's a name that's been tossed around a lot. A name that at first I was kind of against, but I've started to think about it more and see how he could fit into this lineup, because right now the offense has been a serious concern with this team. Just watching them over the last couple games, both tonight. I mean, they do have a run on the board right now. It's 1-0 at the moment, but just straining a lot of runners in scoring position. And then Monday night, the game I was at as well, the offense certainly struggled against the Braves, a team in the division that they should be really beating up on and trying to create some separation within the division. So the fact that this offense has kind of been an issue all year, they're fully healthy now, so there's no more excuses, and they're still not producing at the level that I think a lot of people thought they would. So a guy like Chris Bryant could provide that spark. He can play the outfield as well, in addition to third base, which is a nice kind of versatile. But in terms of the starting pitching, I mean, you get Rich Hill and a veteran starter that could help your team come playoff time, that could help your team kind of just fill in where there's certainly a lack of pitching depth right now. But going out and getting another starter, I've seen John Gray as a name. Certainly not a bad fit. Certainly another guy that can kind of fit in, slide to the back end of the rotation. That would help. But I think, honestly, the Mets should look to prioritize the offense right now. I think that seems to be the biggest concern.
Yeah, I'm with Sam on this one. I think that the offense is the way to go for the Mets if you're going to make a trade before this deadline. I like Chris Bryant. I also like his teammate, Javier Baez. I mean, he just said that he would want to play with Francisco Lindor, and I think it's really funny that players are gravitating towards the Mets now. That's a place that people want to play, especially with a guy like Lindor. And I think either of those guys, either Baez or Bryant, I like Bryant a little more. I think he gives you more average. He gives you some versatility. He can play third. He can play left. So if I'm not with the Mets, I think that's the guy you go after, Bryant. But you're not too upset with Baez. I think this pitching has been weak, but you talk about getting Carlos Carrasco back. You're not sure what you're going to get with him, but he is going to be back with you. DeGrom is going to have a rehab start soon. So when he's going to be back and pitching for the Mets, the pitching is going to be a lot better. And Stroman's still been solid. He's still been one of your guys. Walker's declined a lot, but it's still been Stroman. And with Carrasco and DeGrom coming back, I'm a little more confident in this pitching, but the Mets have always been a story of a team that doesn't hit enough. And I want to make sure that doesn't happen from the Mets. So I think Chris Bryant's a really good fit. I think that's someone who would really help this offense. And like I said, the defensive versatility, third and left, is really likable for the Mets.
Yeah, sorry, I'm going to jump in real quick here. I haven't really been concerned with this. Like, I guess a little concerned with the pitching depth right now. But like you said, Mike, like Carrasco is pitching Friday. So he's going to be back very soon. DeGrom, it looks like, I'm sure a rehab assignment will be in the near future, although they're being very cautious, understandably, with a guy like him. And then you have Stroman and Walker, who have been, up and down a little, but for the most part, very consistent and very solid 2 and 3 options in the rotation. And then who knows what you get from Syndergaard, and then you have Rich Hill as well. Those are a lot of names I just listed for a starting rotation that really in the playoffs, you only need 4 guys. So for me, that's something where you can't be too worried. You're kind of assuming that some of these guys come back fully healthy, but I think that's fair to assume and something to kind of bank on as one of your strengths for this team.
Sam, you mentioned Carlos Carrasco. What's the level of optimism around him kind of in Mets circles, or just what's your expectation for him and his start on Friday?
Yeah, I mean, it's going to be a crazy game on Friday. I'm super excited to be there. It's the black jerseys are back, which is going to be awesome. It should be a packed house. And then, of course, you have Carrasco making his Mets debut. All that coming together. I'm not sure if he'll be on an innings limit or a pitch count limit. Probably not. He'll probably just be monitored closely by Rojas and the pitching staff. So I don't expect too much in his first start in a while. I'm sure he'll probably go like 80 pitches or something like that. But down the road, I do expect him to be a valuable starter in this rotation. Certainly slide into like maybe a number 4 spot behind potentially DeGrom, Stroman, and Walker, of course. If he can do that and even pitch some innings in October, I mean, that would be really a huge benefit for this team because it's almost like you're trading for him in the fact that you're getting him right before the deadline, isn't pitched for you all year, and you know what he can bring to this team. So I think Carrasco, definitely, I'm pretty pretty optimistic with what he can bring to the starting pitch.
Yeah, I think the Carrasco coming back, even if you get something close to what he's capable of, I think that's good enough for this Mets team as a fourth starter. I mean, since 2013, he's had 1 year under a 4 ERA. I think that's really impressive. I mean, his career is 3.77. I think anyone's taking that in this today's MLB as their fourth starter. And it's also a different MLB since he's gotten hurt with the spin rate and dead in baseballs. We're not sure what Carrasco we could see this time. So we could see a totally different pitcher, and that could help his case. So I think that if Carrasco comes even 90 or 95% of what he's capable of, then it's a really good fourth option for the Mets, and it's going to be huge entering the playoffs.
Now, I heard that the Nationals said that there was no chance that they would part ways with Scherzer and send him to a division rival. But if we're so confident about this Mets rotation, why are they even checking tabs on this guy? Or is that just all rumors? Don't pay attention to that.
No, it's certainly more than a rumor. I think the Mets are just like really casting a wide net and looking at any ways to kind of improve this team. And that's what Zach Scott, the GM for the Mets, kind of talked about, how it's not about getting a bat. It's not about getting an arm. It's about just finding the best players that. And another big thing is fitting in with the clubhouse and with the chemistry. That's something that the front office has talked about a lot, because this Mets team and their success all year has been a big part because of that chemistry in the clubhouse. That's just been an integral part of their success for sure. So it's about finding a good candidate, whether that be a starting pitcher, a reliever, or a bat as well, that can fit into the clubhouse. That's kind of a big part of it as well. So they're certainly looking everywhere, which makes it really exciting for the next, under 48 hours here until the deadline to see where they go. I just hope they do get someone, because I think they could certainly benefit from a piece, because the division, they're not running away with it. This series against the Braves presented a good opportunity for them to kind of gain some ground and really set themselves apart from the other teams in the division. It's not happening. So I think it's going to be a tight division race down the stretch, no matter how good the Phillies and Braves are. So you need to keep adding. And I think they really should for the July 30th deadline.
Yeah, I also think with a guy like Scherzer, like, it's hard not to try. I mean, he immediately becomes your number one starter on any team if Jacob deGrom wasn't there already. So, I mean, I think any team, no matter what pitching they would have, would try to go after a guy like that when he's really an A-list pitcher. So that's probably the reason why the Mets went after him, or at least tried or intrigued, and had some interest in him. But what we're hearing now is that he goes out to the West, probably to one of those NL West teams. So that's going to be interesting to see what happens there, because whatever team gets him probably will be the front runner in that division.
Last question. I just want to hear both of your thoughts on, realistically, what do you think the Mets are going to do come Friday, 4 p.m.?
Realistically, I think that's a really tough question. I want to say Chris Bryant, but I'm not going to, just because that's been a rumor for a long time. I don't know if it'll actually happen. John Gray is certainly a piece that I could see them going and get an extra kind of starter to throw in the back end of the rotation. That seems like something. And then he can also maybe even be a long reliever, or Rich Hill turns into a long reliever if too many starters is a problem that you have, I guess. So that could be a realistic move. But honestly, I hate to say I don't know, but I don't know for sure. Who knows? We'll see.
Like Sam, I don't have the crystal ball here, but the Mets are without a doubt aggressive suitors in this market. I'm going to predict that someone on the Cubs ends there, whether it's Javier Baez or it's Chris Bryant. Craig Kimbrell's also on the market. So I think one of those guys might land in Queens, but we're just going to have to wait to find out.
I'm thinking Javier Baez ends up there, but that's just me.
That would be something.
Yeah, I mean, he wants to play with Lindor. That's what he says.
Yeah.
But that will conclude our MLB segment. Stay tuned. The trade deadline's July 30th, 4 p.m. Thanks again to Sam Davis, our Mets beat reporter. And we'll be back to talk Aaron Rodgers' return just after this short break.
those reasons, I really expect the Packers to win this division at the very least and get into the playoffs, which is enough you can ask for if you're Aaron Rodgers, because then it's just one game elimination and then anyone can make the Super Bowl, really. So if you go to a place like Denver or Las Vegas, there's really no guarantee you get back to the playoffs. And I think he has the best chance of doing that in Green Bay.
We said that about Tampa Bay. Like, no one thought about Tampa Bay before Brady, like, who would have thought that happened? And also, just real quick, I want to add, Davante Adams says that he's not taking a pay cut wherever he goes. So Green Bay without Davante Adams, is that still like a playoff football team?
No, I don't agree. I was more talking about Rodgers if he left this year. I understand if Davante Adams,
gotcha.
That creates serious problems. But if you look at Tampa Bay, that situation was really like all they need is a quarterback. I mean, Winston threw so many interceptions that year that it was hard for the team to really win games. And he threw so many pick sixes that it was hard for the defense to keep him in the game. And they had the wide receivers, talk about Chris Godwin, Mike Evans. They had the running game. They had the offensive line. And their defense was amazing. So they really just needed that quarterback piece. I'm not sure if there's another team like that right now. I don't think Denver's that team. I don't think Las Vegas is really that team. They might be closer than Denver is, but there's not that situation that really jumps out at you and says, wow, they're really just the quarterback away. And I think for that reason, it's hard to make the case to Rodgers to go anywhere, at least entering into this year. I think San Francisco might have been the best place for him, but once you draft Trey Lance, that kind of went out the window. But that was probably the best place for him to go. But now that that's not an option, it's going to be interesting to see where he elects to go after this season if he does leave Green Bay. But as for entering this season, I still thought Green Bay was the best place for him to end up.
I agree. I definitely think that they should run it back for another year. And I guess that's exactly what they're going to do, regardless of where Aaron Rodgers is next year, regardless of where Davante Adams is next year. And just to continue with Davante Adams, day by day, we've been getting some updated Madden ratings for this upcoming edition. And Davante Adams is part of the exclusive 99 club. A couple other guys on that list, but I just want to ask real quick, any shocks, surprises, reactions to the rankings that have come out this far?
Yeah, I got one guy that I really was surprised about. He's in New York. His name's Saquon Barkley, and I was shocked that he was only a 90 overall. I understand the injuries. He didn't play, barely at all, only 2 games in 2020, but he was the best running back when he entered in 2018. He was the number 1 pick on anyone's fantasy draft boards. And if we're going to compare Madden, we might as well bring another element of playing into it like fantasy sports. And he was the guy that you thought was going to be the best player in the NFL entering that 2020 season. Honestly, if he stays healthy, he probably is. And talk about this team he's going to go into in 2021. They're better offensively with receivers wise, with Kenny Golladay there, Daniel Jones, another year under center. There's going to be a lot more chances for Barkley to get open and score points. So I think that's more reason for him to be valued higher than what he is at 90 overall. He's only 23. So I was shocked by that rating, and that really stood out to me.
I will say it's tough to just pigeonhole him back into what he was pre-injury, because we didn't see a whole lot from him last year. And then he had one of the most devastating injuries in sports. And don't get me wrong, he can come back from that. If anyone could come back from it, it's a freak athlete like him. But I don't think that you can just give him that, 95 plus rating. And for me, a guy that I was a little shocked by, and he still had a good rating, but I don't understand how Derrick Henry is not the number 1 running back in Madden. Like, you rush for over 2,000 yards, you should just give him a 99. It doesn't make sense to me. And Christian McCaffrey is a great player, and maybe his versatility opens up more of that elevated rating, but it's just, he's the best running back in the league. Derrick Henry is the best running back.
Yeah, I really agree with that. He's without a doubt the best running back in the league, in my opinion, as yours. But I'm looking at this rankings on the running back list, and they've got Kareem Hunt, James Robinson, Chris Carden, Josh Jacobs, all ahead of Saquon Barkley. So for me, that's just mind-boggling, because I'm taking Barkley over all those guys. I think the only running backs you might want to take over him are like Kamara, Henry, Cook, and Chubb. Outside of that, I think Barkley is easily a top 5 running back. So I guess those are the rankings. At the end of the day, it's only Madden, but it is fun to talk about and how they view the players entering this season.
Are you a big fantasy football guy?
You know what? I used to be a huge fantasy football guy. Love to crunch numbers, not as much anymore, but I still play a little bit. Yeah.
Well, let's say you got into it. Would you have some concerns taking Barkley because of the injury?
No, I mean, I'm taking him over Chris Carson or Josh Jacobs easily. So I think that's why I'm looking at these ratings. I mean, I think he bounces back easily. He looks really great in all these workout videos, and it's going to be interesting to see when he steps on the field in week 1, but he's going to be the starting running back right away. And I'm trust him over these guys who seem a little more unproven to me.
All right. Well, I am a bit concerned about the injury, but I'm sure he'll bounce back. I love the optimism. Let's take it to college football real quick, because this weekend we got some rather surprising news. Oklahoma and Texas will not be renewing their media rights contracts. That expires in the summer of 2025. And the expectation is that they'll both be heading to the SEC. I want to talk about the ESPN thing, but before we do that, do you have any reactions to this move from the bat?
No, I mean, it doesn't surprise me really, but my reaction is that it's it seems to be what's happening in a lot of sports. I mean, you talk about the Super League in soccer that was really close to happening. This feels a lot like it, where teams are trying to find a way to get the most revenue, and Texas and Oklahoma merging into what could be the SEC is probably the best way for them to do that. And I'm not surprised by that at all. And I mean, we saw what they're meeting with the Big 12, that it looks like they're not going to renew their agreement, like you said. So if they enter the SEC, that really helps them financially. It's going to help all the teams in the SEC financially. But what it will do is it will help the Big 12, and then it's going to hurt the surrounding conferences, because what if a team like Clemson in the ACC or Oregon in the Pac-12, are those teams going to be now, oh, what's Texas and Oklahoma doing? They're going to go and join this SEC. What if we make our own moves to join this conference? And then, like I said, a Super League emerges. So I think this is just a small step of what could be really bad for college football, because the small conferences, I think, are what makes it so special. And it's not one league, really. It's a lot of small leagues. It's not a professional sports league. So for me, that's what it's going to lead to. And that's the scariest thing.
Yeah, I agree that this move definitely stings for the Big 12, but there are broader implications here. And I'm just curious to see how teams or leagues like the ACC will respond to this, and now we're hearing that the Big 12 is filing a cease and desist against ESPN. And I'm not really sure how to decipher this news. They're allegedly in contact with the remaining 8 teams in the Big 12. But is this just part of that step to what you're mentioning, Mike?
Well, I mean, it makes sense that the network that broadcasts games would want the 2 of the best teams in the Big 12 to join the SEC. I think that's obviously more profitable, because the more games you have between the best teams, the more money you're going to make. If Texas plays Alabama now and Oklahoma plays Auburn, like, that's going to make more money. So it really does make sense that that's going to help the TV viewership and everything, but it's not going to help the smaller schools. It's not going to help the conferences. And like I said earlier, if these schools from other conferences like Clemson, the ACC, and like I said, Oregon, the Pac-12, teams that usually dominate their conference, now if they say, let's all join this one conference in the SEC, that's going to help all those teams in the SEC make more money, because they're playing higher viewed games and bigger schedules. But it's not going to help those teams in the Pac-12 and the ACC that are probably lower. And we're not even there yet. Right now, we're just with the Texas and Oklahoma leaving the Big 12, but that's what we could be heading in. That's the direction we could go in. So if I'm the NCAA, I'm not sure if they have the power to find a way to prevent this, but it does seem like college sports are becoming more and more monetized, especially with the latest thing with athletes being able to make money and generate money as athletes do endorsements. It does seem like there's a trend of college sports becoming more money centered, and all the athletes thing has a lot of positives to it. There's also this thing with Texas and Oklahoma trying to join the SEC in the near future that really could be detrimental to the sport.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point when you talk about the money, because some fans, just of football in general, or you can name other sports too, basketball, aren't necessarily fans of NBA teams because of the money situation. And I think that programs within college sports are so big precisely because of that. And now when teams are, going here, going there, because athletes can now be paid, I think a little bit of that, you lose that element of college sports where it's untouched by the dollar signs. And I guess speaking to that, do you think that these Oklahoma and Texas teams are good enough to compete in the SEC? Because they definitely benefited a little bit from being like that big fish, small pond. Not that the Big 12 is a bad conference, but SEC football is as good as it gets. Do you think that either of these two teams are going to regret this?
Yeah. I mean, I think Oklahoma is really the only team that can maybe really still pursue a national championship if they're in the SEC. They would be among the likes of Texas A&M and like Auburn and maybe like Tennessee, but they would still have a trouble against Alabama. And I think their record would suffer for it, even though they make more money. And my quick fix that I really just thought of now would, if you expand the teams in the NCAA football system and you make it so if you win your conference, you get an automatic bid, then a team like Texas and Oklahoma would not want to leave. If they can win the Big 12, which is a much easier conference, and they get an automatic bid, then why leave? So I think if NCAA or college football really wanted to do something to keep this from happening, then this is the move. Because then if the Oregon leaving the Pac-12 will never even happen because they can win the Pac-12 and get an automatic bid. And the same thing with Clemson in the ACC. So I think that could be a real next step that could happen. And this is going to avoid the super teams. And it's going to be really interesting because you're going to want to watch more Pac-12 games now because that winner's automatically going to be in the national championship. And even if it turns into a 6-team or 8-team national championship with the 6th team and the top 2 get a bye, or the 8-team where it's single elimination, 1 plays 8, I think that could be a way to stop this from happening. And I think they're trending in that direction anyway. But if you have it so the Big 12 winner automatically gets in, Texas and Oklahoma are not going to want to leave because the winning that conference is relatively easy for them compared to going the SEC and having to fight your way through Auburn, Alabama, Texas A&M, Georgia. I mean, that's a lot harder. So if college football wants to fix this seems like the easy solution to me.
Mike, we should have you as the head of the NCAA. We got to have you making these decisions.
Sign me up. I'm ready.
Well, that will do it for our football segment. We'll be back in just a minute. We're going to talk the NBA draft and all rumors related to it. We're going to take a quick break and be right back. Welcome back to One on One Nightly, and we're here to break down the NBA draft that's hosted at the Barclays Arena July 29th, tomorrow, 8 o'clock. Detroit holds the number 1 pick, and it seems like Cade Cunningham is the slam dunk number 1, but it seems like Detroit hasn't quite committed to him. Mike, would it shock you if anything happens other than Cade going number 1 tomorrow?
It would absolutely shock me. I don't see this happening. I think Jalen Green maybe is the only guy because of his ceiling. I mean, he's an elite scorer, but Cade Cunningham gives you something nobody else in the draft does. His size separates him. He's 6'8", he's 220. And he would give the Pistons an immediate boost offensively. I mean, we were talking about this before the show. If Memphis offered Ja Morant for the number 1 overall pick, I don't think Pistons would jump on that. I really think Cade Cunningham's that good. I think that's an argument for another day. But he really gives you so much offensively, and this is what the Pistons don't have. I mean, Killian Hayes, their previous first-round pick, lacks a lot of ability to create offensively, and that's what Cade Cunningham would do. He would really go into that offense really well and pair well with a guy like Jeremy Grant, who was their strongest offensive player this year, and they would have 2 solid offensive players that would really boost them. So that's why I think Cade Cunningham's a no-doubt pick. I mean, he's that good scoring the ball. At that size, you don't find that everywhere. I mean, he's really Ben Simmons' size without any of the shooting problems Ben Simmons has. I mean, you're going to take that. He might not have the intangibles Ben Simmons does, but his talent really exceeds what that Ben Simmons has. So, like I said, if Memphis offered Ja Morant for the number 1 overall pick, I think Cade Cunningham's that good where the Pistons might not take that. And that's why I think Cade Cunningham's a no-doubt number 1 overall pick.
And that Ja Morant, trade is just we're just tossing
There's
out.
no shot that ever happens, but I think it's fun to compare 2 point guards that went in the top of the draft.
Well, let's talk about another point guard, because we've heard reports that, OKC is trying to be active. And one of those packages that they're offering is Shai Gilgeous-Alexander in the 6th overall pick to Detroit for the number 1. And I have a feeling what you're going to say to that, Mike. No way?
Yeah, no way I'm touching that. I think Cade Cunningham's that good of a player. I mean, there's one thing about the NBA. 1 great player is better than 2 good players. I mean, look at a lot of the things in the NBA. A player like Giannis, a player like LeBron. I mean, a player like Chris Paul can turn around a team. 1 great player is massive. But 2 guys that are solid, I mean, there's a lot of teams with 2 solid players that don't do a lot. I mean, look at Minnesota. They've got Karl Anthony Towns there and D'Angelo Russell. I mean, those are 2 good players, but they're one of the worst teams in the league. So it really shows you that 1 great player, and if Cade Cunningham's that great player, then in my opinion, it's no doubt that you turn down that trade and you get your player. And maybe he's a bust, maybe he doesn't turn out well, but I think he's that kind of prospect that it's worth the gamble.
Yeah, you can't ignore the talent. And for our most of our lives, Detroit has not really been a great basketball city. I mean, it's been quite some time since they were really relevant. And I know you try and go out and get Blake Griffin and you have Andre Drummond, but they haven't been able to really put it together. Right now, they've got Killian Hayes, they've got Sadiq Bey, and it looks like Cade Cunningham could really jumpstart this franchise. Do you see him as that kind of like generational guy or a guy that can change the course of a team's, path?
Yeah, I really do think. I don't think he's maybe the hype like Zion had when he was. Zion was like the next thing since LeBron kind of hype. But as prospects go, I really think he's one of the best we've had in the past 10 years. And that's saying a lot. I mean, you mentioned the Pistons haven't really been good in a while. I mean, since 2004 when they swept the Lakers, they really haven't made a lot of noise in the playoffs. They made some noise, but not a lot. And I think Cade Cunningham's a guy that could get there. But I think the Pistons are so weak that it's not going to be him alone. Like LeBron to the Cavaliers in 2004, it took a lot of time. And he was with that team in 2007. They lose in the finals. I mean, he was with that team for 6-7 years, and they didn't really do a lot. They made 1 finals appearance. So I think there could be a similar thing with here in Pistons. Not saying Cade Cunningham's LeBron, but it's not going to be immediately he's there and they're a playoff team. There still needs to be a lot of work with this team to get him there.
Yeah, I think that in Cade Cunningham, I think people expect to be the number one pick. But the interesting thing about this year's draft is that there are 3, maybe 4 guys that definitely could be considered number one picks in previous drafts. Do you see any shakeup in that top 4 of picks between Cade Cunningham, Jalen Green, Jalen Suggs, and Evan Mobley?
I think Cleveland's the most interesting team there just because there's a lot of talk surrounding Colin Sexton and Kevin Love. I wouldn't be surprised if one of those guys gets traded on draft night. I don't think Sexton's that guy. I think Kevin Love could easily go on draft night for a later first-round pick or something. And getting rid of that contract is going to be on Cleveland's minds. And sending him to a contender, I think a lot of contenders would be okay with adding Kevin Love to their team as another scoring option. I think Cleveland's the team that would make a trade. Do I think they will? No, I don't think they trade out of that 3rd spot. Evan Mobley seems like the guy they're going to get right there at number 3. I mean, he's the 2nd best prospect in the draft, in my opinion. Jalen Green seems to be rising up the boards, and it seems like he's going to go to Houston at 2. And if you can get Mobley at 3, you're going to be really happy if you're Cleveland because you need that athletic scoring big man. That's what you need. Andre Drummond sucked up the ball. He got you rebounds, and he could only score on the low post. He couldn't do anything else. And a guy like Mobley does everything else that Drummond couldn't do, as a big man at least. And if you unload someone like Kevin Love, that really frees up the inside of the paint for Mobley to create and score. And I think what Sexton and Garland have been missing is that scoring big man. So even though Cleveland has the assets to trade, I don't think they're going to trade out of this 3rd overall pick. I expect them to stay put and draft Mobley. And then for the rest of the draft, I think it's going to shape out with, Houston getting Jalen Green at 2, and then Suggs will go number 4. I think those are the top 4 players in this draft. A lot of people are saying it's a 4-player draft, and that's how I see it shaking out. I think Jalen Green's got crazy upside, a high ceiling. He's probably the best scorer in this draft, but he doesn't offer you the versatility Cade Cunningham does. So that's why he'll probably go number 2. And the Mobley's not going to go 2 because that's a weird fit with Christian Wood there. So for those reasons, it's going to go Cunningham, Green, and Mobley, at least in my eyes. And then after the top 4, that's when it's going to get interesting. I think that's when teams are going to pick players who are not expected to be picked. And the 4-player draft, though, I really stand by. I think that's how we're going to see it with those 4 players going in the top 4. And then the rest is going to be really just a toss-up to see what happens.
Now, I know that Mobley fit in Houston doesn't really make sense on paper, but you mentioned that talent that teams can't pass up on. And for whatever reason, let's say that Houston is just tantalized by his talent and have to take him. What kind of position are the Cavs in if you're taking a guard? Because 3 and 4 are going to be, 2 through 4 are going to be Mobley, Green, and Suggs. What do you do if you're Cleveland? You have to take one of those 2 guys with the guard situation you have already.
It's a great question because Mobley's that kind of talent that it doesn't matter what position he is, and Houston might just go ahead and take him at 2. It's a really unique situation because in there, I do see Cleveland maybe moving back in the draft. Although Jalen Green's that good, having him, Sexton, and Garland all together doesn't really make a lot of sense. So the pressure is going to be on Cleveland if Mobley goes 2. And I could see him trading back 3, getting 2 picks in the first round, and potentially a player. That might happen, but I'm still set on Mobley dropping to 3. I still think that happens. But like you said, if that doesn't, it doesn't make sense to get Jalen Green or Suggs unless you depart from Sexton or Garland, at least one of them. So for those reasons, Cleveland's going to be in a real tough spot if they don't get Mobley at 3.
We know how talented these guys 1 through 4 are. And I think that regardless of how it shakes up, we kind of know who 1 through 4 is going to be, unless a guy like Kuminga rises or, someone trades up because they really want someone else. But I'm concerned, or I want to know who you have as more of a sleeper pick in this draft, because, once you get out of that top 4, once you get out of that lottery, once it goes on, who are some of the names that we should be on the lookout for?
Yeah, I got one name when I was looking through the draft board. It was someone that really popped out to me. Sharif Cooper, I really think is a sleeper in this draft. He's ranked around 22, 23, 24 in a lot of mock drafts. So low 20s, usually you're going to find your sleepers. NBA is only a 2-round draft, so it's not like we're finding a 5th or 6th round sleeper in the NFL. But Sharif Cooper, I mean, he's a guy that didn't play a lot of games. I mean, he only played 12 games. He was hurt a lot, but he ended the season as one of the only 2 freshmen in the past 30 years to average 20 points and 8 assists. And the other guy was Trae Young. So, I mean, that stat pops out of me. And when I see someone produce in college as a freshman, that means they've got serious talent. It's not like a lot of seniors or juniors where they've been in college basketball for so long, really start to understand it. When you come out of high school and you start to dominate college basketball, that really stands out to me. I mean, he's got great vision, great quickness off the dribble, but there are some drawbacks. I mean, his size is 6'1", 180. He's smaller on the defense, so he's got very low defensive versatility. There's some problems there. And the three-point shooting is really raw. His jump shot doesn't look fluid. He kind of fades back when he puts it up. So he does have some of that, but the talent, athleticism, and quickness really stands out to me. He's kind of a Ja Morant type. We talked a lot about him on the show. I don't know why, but he's a similar player. And for those reasons, I like him as a sleeper. If you're a team in the 20s, potentially the Knicks at 19 or 21, that's a player you keep your eyes out for.
Yeah, I'm going with another guy in the late first round, possibly early second round, and that's Jared Butler from Baylor. I know you mentioned kind of the younger guys and the talent that they flash, but to me, I see more of a proven veteran guy in him. He was first team All-American, one of those leaders on the best team in college basketball last year. And I see him as a guy that can plug right into a contender and give you some quality minutes off the bench. He's been there in a championship run. And I understand it's a whole different game when you get to the NBA, but I do think that teams are willing to draft a guy that proves some of that leadership or experience in a run.
Yeah, I definitely agree. Experience is huge in this NBA draft. There's a lot of guys in the late 20s that really plug straight into a team and can be a difference maker. I mean, I think about Jalen Brunson for the Mavericks. I mean, he's been huge for them, and he was a guy who's really had a great college career, and he wasn't a one-and-done type player, but he still makes his mark in the NBA. So there's really room for those players and guys like Cooper. So it's going to be interesting to see how those sleepers play out and what we get from those kind of players in late in the draft, because those are the picks the Knicks have, 19 and 21. Those are the type of players they're going to be looking at. And you see a guy like Emmanuel Quickley, the difference he could make being drafted later in the draft. So it's definitely going to be interesting to see how these players really turn out that are going to be drafted, in the 20s.
A team that I'm personally really excited for on draft night is the Golden State Warriors. I know it's a little shout out to our producer, Alex Wolz. They have the 7 and 14 pick, and they've got James Wiseman, and they've got a big contract in Andrew Wiggins. So they have the flexibility to make a lot of different types of moves for a guy that might help them, while Steph and Clay are still at star levels. Do you expect to see Golden State coming out and making a big move tomorrow night?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a serious possibility they're traders at this draft night. I mean, we said the same thing last year, and they stayed put and they made their pick. But I think it could happen this year. I think Ben Simmons entering the equation as someone who could potentially be traded. Talk about the Cavs guys. There's more room for trades this year than I think there were last year, and I think the Ben Simmons one is really interesting. I mean, is he going to be traded on draft night? Because it seems like the Sixers want to get him out of Philadelphia. So there's a lot of more storylines heading into this draft, in my opinion, especially with the guys, like I said, Simmons and the Cleveland players. So it's going to be really, really to keep our eyes open for what Golden State does with their pick, because it seems like they already have a lot of pieces once Curry comes back and Clay comes back and Wiggins is there. So they've got some guys, but they're always a question mark what they do, because it seems like they're so close once everyone gets healthy. So it's going to be really, really something we got to keep our eyes open for what they do with their pick.
Yeah, I think it's tough I think that seeing Ben Simmons on the Warriors would be so exciting. It's just like a bigger Draymond Green, who has some of these qualities that a point guard has, but struggles, in the half court.
And the thing is, Curry can play off the ball pretty well, and so does Klay Thompson. I mean, Curry's not a ball dominant point guard like some are. I mean, how many times have we seen Curry come off a screen to hit a big three? I mean, he does that all the time. So Simmons really could work in that system, but it's just how much would they have to give up to get him, and it would definitely take their first round pick and more. And seeing what the Sixers want from Ben Simmons in a trade, it seems like a lot. So maybe the Golden State's not willing to trade that price, but we'll have to see on draft night because it will involve the first round pick if they want Ben Simmons.
Yeah, I think to me that Simmons haul, whenever it happens, is going to be there. Like, I don't think they're giving up Ben Simmons for nothing. And I do think that the Warriors can offer an enticing package. I think a team that maybe makes a little bit more sense, and it's tough to think about because they're not far removed from a championship run, but it's the Toronto Raptors. I think that Pascal Siakam would be a phenomenal fit on the Warriors. It seems like Kyle Lowry is going to go elsewhere. They've got the 4 pick in the draft. That gives them the flexibility to kind of get another franchise guy. And then you package, let's say, the 7, the 14, Wiseman, and I'm not sure the specifics of his contract, but if you need to give them Wiggins to make the money work, I think that's a no-brainer for the Warriors.
Yeah, that's a great deal if they would want to make it. It's funny you say that the Raptors seem really close because it was only 2 years ago and they were NBA champions and they were fighting for a playoff spot in the bubble. They made the playoffs and they were really a game 7 away from making it far in the Eastern Conference. So it's hard to see the Raptors walking away from Siakam right now. And if they get a guy like Jalen Suggs at 4, then that could really change the team's scoring. And with Nick Nurse still there, they have a good head coach. So I'm not sure if they're ready to walk away from Siakam, but if they do, it's going to take 7 and 14 from Golden State, in my opinion, and probably a player maybe like Wiggins. So if they do make that move, that immediately launches Golden State to probably the top of the Western Conference. And it's interesting because we could see Siakam, we could see Simmons, we could see a lot of people the Golden State ends up going after in draft night.
Yeah, and I think that's something that could be of benefit for both teams is that this trade doesn't have to happen on draft night. And I think the same thing with Simmons. Like, I'm a skeptic that he's getting traded tomorrow. And I think a lot of these trades that are inevitably going to happen. We're talking about Damian Lillard and, maybe Minnesota's going to be active. There are a lot of teams that I think are going to be active. And I think players that are drafted in this draft are going to end up on different teams. But I feel like there hasn't been enough buzz for any major trade to happen tomorrow.
Yeah, I mean, how many times do we say going into a draft night, this player is going to get traded, X player is going to get traded, and it never happens? I feel like that's an old song. I mean, we're always talking about that, and it really never happens. But it is fun to talk about because those draft night trades really make it as exciting as it always is. And even if it doesn't happen, it's hard to see Simmons being a Sixers uniform in 2021 season, at least the start of it. So for those reasons, it's going to be interesting to see if Philadelphia moves him on draft night or if they wait till after.
Listen, man, I'm a Celtics fan. I've heard Celtics eyeing X players, Celtics, going after that player for so long. So, because of that, I think that inner skeptic kind of comes out in me, and I'm not so sure that anything crazy is going to happen tomorrow night. But time will tell. We've got the NBA draft tomorrow night in Brooklyn at 8:00. That'll do it for our basketball talk, but we'll be back to discuss the Olympics. Welcome back for our final segment. We're going to talk about the 2020 Tokyo Olympics happening in 2021. But I think that this year has been a lot of fun. I think some people are getting into sports that maybe they've never heard of, maybe they've never seen before, and they're finally watching it on the biggest stage. And Mike, what events have you had the opportunity to pay attention to or follow or, just be familiar with?
Yeah, I mean, Olympics is always on in my house whenever it's on, so I get a chance to watch it from time to time. It's been tough with the coverage because it's all the way in Tokyo, and you're either watching at 6 a.m. when you first get up, if you get up that early, or it's like right now the Olympics are live in Tokyo. So it's a little weird with the hours, but I've been watching a lot of swimming. That's always probably my favorite summer sport. The new 3-on-3 basketball is really interesting. I was watching a lot of the women's basketball on that, and they got the gold. So that was a fun watch. And the basketball is going to start heating up, and baseball is around the corner too. The first games start tomorrow. So there's going to be a lot of sports to watch. We're entering the halfway point, I think, in the Olympics. And it's been really fun. The no fans has kind of hurt the atmosphere, I think, around the Olympics. But at the end of the day, it's still the event. It's still what it always is. And that's what makes it a great watch.
We're both baseball guys. How great is it that we've got that back in the Olympics?
It's really fun, and I like seeing guys like Todd Frazier. I mean, he's playing for Team USA. Adrian Gonzalez playing for Team Mexico. Ian Kinsler for Team Israel. So there's a lot of ex-major leaguers that we all know and love, and it's going to be fun to see them compete. It's a little weird because the Team USA is not really like the best we have to offer, and it's not what we're used to seeing. I mean, the World Baseball Classic is really the national event for baseball. That's what it always is, but there's something about winning a gold medal for your country in baseball that makes it special, and that's what it's going to be fun to watch.
You remember that World Baseball Classic from a couple years ago?
Oh,
that was like electric. That's baseball like you talk about,
I remember Team Italy I was rooting for at the time, in addition to the United States, and like Anthony Rizzo was playing for the Italian national team, and that was really cool to watch. And I remember like Puerto Rico versus USA is one of the all-time great baseball games. So that's what I'm really looking forward to in baseball, at least for national, and I can't wait till that comes back. But in the meantime, it's nice to watch these teams compete in the Olympics.
I totally agree. And you mentioned that 3-on-3 basketball. I was able to watch a little bit of that. Super fun. I am so on board with that being in the Olympics going forward.
Like a pickup. It's like pickup sport.
It's like a culmination of all these different, like you got handball and quick basketball. Like I'm very big on that going forward.
Yeah, it's an entertaining watch, and some people complain that the Summer Olympics are too many sports, but it just gives more people, options to watch from the sports they want. So I'm all for it, and I think it's good for the Olympics.
I'm a big, I don't know if you guys know this, and our producer, Alex Wool, sports manager, I think we should get some, maybe a water polo podcast going, because I love water polo. I actually played a little bit in high school. I was terrible at it, and I'm not playing at Fordham, but I have had the opportunity to call a couple of the games, and I don't know if you've had the opportunity to put some of those games on, but man, that sport is like ferocious. And Fordham has a great water polo program. I'm buddies with a couple guys on the team. It's been great being able to see that program thrive.
No, water polo is a really fascinating sport. I haven't been able to catch a game, but just the ability to like keep yourself above water, tread water, and make plays and throw, like, it's really impressive what they do, and it's something you got to admire. Seeing these people, like the top water polo players in the country, going at the Olympics, like that's what makes it so great. Like the top fencing players, like I was watching weightlifting, and to see people try to like walking up to the bar and try to lift it. It's great to see like the best in their respective sports, like archery. Like the best archer in the world might be just a regular person who works a regular job. And that's what makes the Olympics so special, that these are really regular people that happen to be amazing at this one like niche sport.
Yeah. And you've mentioned kind of the best of the best. And I wanted to talk about Team USA, but before we do that, let's talk about someone that like very well could be if there was one, the MVP of the 2016 Olympics, and that's Simone Biles. We just got news that she's withdrawn from the individual all-around gymnastics competition for mental well-being. And I just wanted to hear kind of your thoughts on that situation, Mike.
Yeah, it's really interesting how this events have transpired. I mean, I think everyone should really be supporting Simone Biles. It reminds me of Naomi Osaka when she withdrew from Wimbledon, and it's got to be really tough for these athletes, especially when it's every 4 years. Like, you've got that much time to prepare for this event, but that's that much more pressure. It's not like an NBA player who they lose this year, they've got next year to turn around. I mean, the amount of insurmountable pressure you have on you to do something that only happens every 4 years. I mean, that's a lot for these athletes. And I think a lot of people should understand that with Simone Biles, and no one should be like mad. There's some people on social media that are mad for her that she didn't, try her best and play for Team USA. But it's a great teammate to say, you know what, if I'm not able to do this, then I shouldn't be participating. Like, if anyone knows gymnastics and her, and if she thought she was going to not help the team win, then we should all trust Simone Biles. Like, she knows best. So I think that's what's most important here. And she shouldn't be participating in anything she doesn't feel like she should be. I mean, it's her decision to participate. No one should make her. So for all those reasons, it's up to us to support her. And I think that's the biggest thing we can do. I remember watching her first event in these Olympics, and there's something that seemed off about her. I mean, she wasn't great. I remember she was doing the vault for the all-around team qualifier. And, she seemed a little off. She didn't look mentally in it. So when I saw that, and then, you see her news that she was struggling with the mental side of, the pressure entering these events, it starts to make a little sense. But it's up to all of us to really support her through this time. No one should force her to do these events. And she's proven everything to the sport. She's already probably the best gymnast of all time. So there's nothing left for her to prove. So if she doesn't feel mentally able to, or even physically, I know she's going through some medical injuries or some things that are holding her back from competing at her top ability, we should all understand that.
Yeah, I mean, she had 4 gold medals in 2016. And similar to that Osaka situation, she's really the best at what she does. They're both the best at what they do. And I think that it's we're seeing a lot of opinions online from people that don't really know what they're talking about. And I think everyone, except for the people that, Naomi Osaka and Simone Biles are going up against, everyone wants to see them perform. So let them do so when they're ready. And something that I just did a bit of research into was kind of a phenomenon called the twisties. I don't know if you looked into this at all.
Yes, I've heard that.
And here's the thing, like, you can maybe equate that to like the yips in baseball or golf or whatever, but it's a whole different thing when you're launching your body in the air with the potential to seriously harm yourself. Like, if you're in a position where you think that you're going to get hurt playing your sport, that's unfair to expect her to perform through that.
Yeah, and it's funny to see people online who've probably never done any gymnastics in their entire life try to tell someone who's like a 23 gold medalist, like, whether they should perform or not, or whether they should participate in this event or not. And for those reasons, it's like really crazy to think people know the sport better than she does. So she really should be the one who should say, I'm fit or not to participate. And we should all just support whatever decisions he comes to. And that's like up to her to decide, and not anyone in the media or on social media too.
I absolutely agree. And before we wrap things up here, I do want to talk a bit about Team USA and basketball, because I think a lot of people were concerned, when the exhibition games came around. And I was one of those guys that said, don't worry, they'll be fine. The dream team lost to a college team. And then they lose to France 83-76. And that's seriously troubling. And then they play Iran, and that was a blowout. Like, you've seen. I mean, they doubled their score. What do you think kind of their comfort level and confidence is going forward, as that's their first loss since 2004 in the Olympics?
Yeah, the ups and downs of this team have been crazy. I mean, they had lost 3 out of the last 4 before the blowout with Iran. And, it's just this team getting used to each other. I'm sure if they had more time together, they would not even come close to any games where they looked like they were losing. But it's just a lack of chemistry that they have. And these national teams have so much more to play for because no one's expecting them to do anything. And to beat Team USA is so much for them compared to like Damian Lillard and Kevin Durant. This isn't a gold medal for them is not what an NBA championship is or what the regular season is. So for those reasons, that's why like teams like France play so well together and they were able to take down USA. I think it's going to be interesting how they move forward because they really have no room for error if they want to win this gold medal. They have to probably win every single game. In the group stage, they do, and then in the knockout round, they will as well. So, I mean, I'm watching out for teams like Slovenia with Luka Doncic. I mean, he looks unreal. He dropped 48 points in his first game. Like, are you serious? He is going to be someone that's going to want this gold medal. And honestly, if Luka Doncic wins the gold medal, that's the equivalent to like multiple NBA championships, at least for a legacy. Because, I mean, Slovenia qualified for this first time in its history because of him. And now they're really close if they come out of this group stage into the knockout round. So if a team like that and France with Rudy Gobert, I mean, they're a team to watch out for. So
Evan Fournier.
Yes, Evan Fournier, Frank Ntilikina. So there are some teams that, could give the U.S. like trouble, but if the U.S. is on, they should win this gold medal. And there's not a lot of room for error. So if they have another blunder, this could be over for them. And that would be a real shock for the whole basketball world.
Yeah, you mentioned Luka's stellar, I guess, Olympic debut, 48 points.
Second most Olympic points all time. That's
insane. Yeah. And I guess that performance just kind of reminds me of in his rookie season, he said that the NBA was the easiest league for him to score in. And that seemed like, that made me roll my eyes at the time. But I see what's going on now and just the differences in officiating. And it's starting to add up. Like I'm seeing these American players really struggle adapting to some of the different officiating and the different defenses that come with playing on an international level.
Yeah. And I think that's going to be what's we're going to have to look out for because they have really no room for error. So if they continue with problems with those and they drop a game, I don't think they'll even make it out of the group stage if they go 1-2. And let's say they went out on the group stage, they still have all the knockout games to go through. So we're going to have to, keep on watching and see what happens. But if they lose, that's worse than if they win. It's all like, okay, they won. They should have done that. But if they lose, then it's like, oh my God, Team USA didn't come through with the gold medal. Then everyone's talking about it. But if they win, no one's really going to be talking about it. So Luka Doncic is in a great position because if he takes home a medal, it looks great for him. And if he didn't, no one expected him to. So there's a lot of storylines in this men's basketball side of the Olympics, which makes it a really great watch. And it's probably going to be one of the most interesting tournaments for basketball we've had in a while.
I totally agree. I want to pay attention to this more than any other Olympic basketball event that I've experienced in my life. But that will just about do it for our show tonight. Make sure to tune in to One-on-One on Saturday night from 11 p.m. to 2 a.m. at 90.7 FM. If you missed anything from our show tonight, be sure to check Facebook and YouTube for videos of the show. The sports director of WFUV is Bobby Chaffardini, and special thanks to our Mets beat reporter, Sam Davis, and our Yankees beat reporter, Ryan Gregware, for joining us. Our producer tonight was Alex Woles. And for my co-host, Mike Calamari, I'm Jack Roach. Thank you for joining us tonight. One-on-One is a production of WFUV Sports.